It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Mike Harber.
Hey, welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. My name is Mike Harber. Joining me today is my friend and co-host, Paul Gustafson. Hey, Paul, how are you, my friend?
Mike, I'm doing fantastic. It's great to be with you once again. I always enjoy just our conversations and definitely the topics that we highlight in terms of leadership. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. And if you're watching or joining us live on the Empowered Living Show, make sure you grab your copy of the Breaking Average book. We're having our discussion, continuing in our discussion, Paul, of the topics around breaking average, the 7 critical factors of team strong leadership. We're going to talk about this idea of engage, cite in the Insight chapter today.
Yeah, we've had some great conversations the last 2 podcasts on Insight. This is the 3rd element of Insight, and really looking forward to our discussion. I think people are going to have fun with this word, by the way.
Yeah, I love it. It's going to tie into the last episode we had a little bit when we think about engage, cite, and engaging others. But Paul, before we go too much further, just share a story from this chapter of Insight, or this portion of the story around engage, cite, before we go much further in this topic.
Yeah, I think stories are powerful. You know, we talked about hindsight on the last podcast, and stories. The reason why we tell stories because they have the hindsight for us to be able to understand things. The story that I wanted to share today, in the book, we've got a really cool story, by the way. It's one that maybe people are familiar with. There's tons of examples of engaged cite. The one that we had in the book was on Verizon, right? The Verizon commercial. You remember that commercial, right? With the guy walking around like, "Can you hear me now?" And that campaign is really a good analogy of engaged cite. But I think a story that I think is relevant to today.
Wait, Paul, I hear you now. I'm good.
Okay. Just checking. Yeah, if you're a Verizon guy. I mean, that really set the tone for Verizon. I mean, it put them on the map. That was such a good marketing campaign. Were they really better than AT&T and T-Mobile and Sprint and Nextel and all those other ones at those times? Maybe they were, or maybe they weren't, but they did a convincing job of showing how they were engaging with the customers to make that happen. So it's a great story. Read that in the book. But what I want to do is highlight the story of Alex Smith. Now, Alex Smith, we've talked about him on this podcast before, and so I don't want to necessarily regurgitate all of those elements, but he just recently was nominated. Not only nominated, he won the Comeback Player of the Year for the NFL. It's a great story, and I love that story because if you unpack it, and there's lots of ways to unpack it, you know, if you hadn't heard, he got tackled a couple years back, injured his leg, broke his leg in such a bad way, 17 surgeries. I don't know how many surgeries it was. Almost lost his leg, almost lost his life. Comes back, leads his team to a conference championship, you know, winning 5 out of 1, the 6 games that he started in, he won 5 of them. Fantastic. And he just accepted the award. So what we're going to do is we're going to play his acceptance speech. You know, it's kind of virtual on the backdrop of the Super Bowl, the recent Super Bowl. But watch this. And the reason why I want you to watch it is because he really brings out some of the engaged cite that took place in the process of him coming back. So here's Alex Smith.
Thank you for this incredible honor. You know, playing this game takes a physical toll, and there are so many guys that are deserving of this recognition. 2 years ago, I was sitting in a wheelchair wondering, had the life I had known changed forever? Anger, pity, self-doubt. Why me? These were feelings that I had had at certain points throughout my career. But this time, it wasn't about football. It was bigger. It was about me being a father to play with my children, a husband to go on walks with my wife, and despite my new limitations, me getting my life back. My goal was football, not because I actually thought it was a reality, but because I knew my life would be better because of it. Fighting the fear surrounding my new leg with the pursuit of something bigger. and a life lived without regret. It took 728 days. 728 days of small victories and major setbacks, of countless hours of physical therapy and just as many sleepless nights. I have to say a huge thank you to my awesome team of doctors, nurses, and staff at Inova Fairfax, led by Dr. Robin West and my PT, Seth Blee. And on that note, a huge thank you to all the frontline workers across the country who sacrificed so much this past year. It wasn't until my time at the CFI, a military rehabilitation center, that I truly realized how fortunate I was. It was the honor of a lifetime to be able to rehab alongside our country's bravest, who sacrificed life and limb so that we could play a game we all love. It was also there that they first put the football back in my hand. To Dr. Alderetti, Johnny Owens, and the entire team at CFI, thank you for challenging me and making it okay to dream big again. This has been a road to recovery that I didn't walk alone, and I share this award with every single person who has helped me along the way, but none more so than my wife, Elizabeth, and our 3 kids. I love you more than you could ever know. You have given me strength, motivation, and support that I couldn't get anywhere else. And I hope that I have at least made you half as proud as you make me every day. And to my teammates in the locker room, this past season is something that I will cherish forever. Thank you for your encouragement and believing in this old man once again. And to anyone out there going through hard times, know that better days lie ahead. Embrace all that life has to offer. There are no ups without the downs. Honor every single day. And remember, just live. Thank you.
You know, he got that award. He got that award because of Engage Sight, guys. He put people around him who could help him, who could see further than he could, but also could buy into his vision. He had a vision, and he found others that kind of would surround him and encourage him and map that out. He did the impossible. And that's what Engage Sight allows us to do. Engage Sight allows us to do the impossible. So that's, Mike, that's the story that I thought would be really beneficial for us to hear and listen to today.
Yeah, we can talk more about that as we get further into this episode, Paul. I love Alex Smith. I love the story. I was a fan of his when he was the Chiefs quarterback as well. We'll talk more about that. But hey, if you know a guy, if you're listening to the Breaking Average podcast or watching on the Empowered Living show, if you know a leader, a man, a woman who is making a difference in the world, where they're using their leadership to make a huge impact, we want to know them. We want to talk to them. We would love to have them on the Breaking Average podcast show as an interview. Visit us at breakingaveragepodcast.com/leader and introduce us to them. That's all you got to do. Just put a little information in there and we'll do the rest. Paul, also I want to bring in our guest with Diane Kane and Rick Morris with us today. They're always joining us. They've been great guests to help us carry this discussion around breaking average. Diane, Rick, how are you guys today?
Good.
Doing well.
Rick, are you doing good?
I'm doing good, man.
Okay, just making sure. I know, you're a big Tennessee Volunteer fan. There's been lots of changes over there in y'all's world. You're headed toward the bottom once again. I mean, you've been there, but you're headed further.
Got a new AD, got a new coach. Still got I believe we still recruited better than Arkansas, even with a dumpster fire of a program. So we're good. Yeah.
These guys are always
bringing it back to football. Always bringing it back to football.
We'll talk about that more in a little bit. Diane, we're talking about we're in our kind of our third element of insight today. Why don't you just kind of recap where we've been so far?
There's 3 critical factors to insight. So we've talked about the first one, which was foresight, the leader seeing the way. And then we talked about the second one, which was hindsight and looking backwards and getting the lessons learned and that evaluated experience. And today is the engaged sight. It's bringing it all together. It's bringing the team together and really seeing how we can move forward in winning the game.
Yeah, and today we're going to focus on the element of engaged sight. And we also we all say that this is Paul's book, but there was a lot of contributing authors to it as well. And, in this chapter, one of my favorite contributing authors, Richard Mobley. If you do not know Richard Mobley, he's the unofficial mayor of Birmingham. I remember when I first started the JMT, people always asked you, hey, what's your name? Where are you from? Birmingham. Oh, Richard. And I was like, no. And I do have a funny story. There was younger in my career, there was a sponsor projects that I dealt with quite a bit, and we didn't get along. And her name was Jackie Mobley. And so I go to Richard, and I'm meeting him the first time. I mean, it's a true story. I'm meeting him the first time, and I said, do you happen to be married to Jackie? And he goes, yes, I am. And right then I just shriveled. I was like, there's no hope for me ever to get to know this guy or to ever have a relationship with him. And I said, well, yeah, I worked with her at the bank for many years. And he said, yeah, she didn't work for the bank. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. Okay, let's rebuild. Let's go. So happens to be the same name, but was not the same person. But, Richard is this, he's just turned into very much a father figure to me. He's somebody who checks in on me and somebody I hold very dearly. So it's great to see him contribute to the book. And he has a tremendous amount of both foresight and hindsight, right? Which is what really equals that engaged sight, which is, a word, Paul, that I, you made up for this book because we needed a word for that. And I think it's perfect. In his insights, one, he shares some templates, Paul, of our user stories. So if you've heard the podcast and you've heard us talking about user stories and how to apply them, to go buy the book, and you'll see how Richard took those and applied those to really anything, coaching, it could be anything. But it's as we start talking about personas, which we discussed about in previous podcasts, and making sure that we're focusing on the who, the what, and the why. And Richard does a beautiful job of that. I think one of the other things that I really loved about his insight in the book, and I don't want to steal all the thunder because I want people to go buy the book and read it, but asking what if questions instead of yeah, but questions, right? Framing it to what if from a hope perspective versus already answering that, yeah, but I don't need to do this. And I think that that's a phenomenal call out from our good and dear friend, Richard Mobley. And speaking of cool people, Paul, I believe we've got a really cool sponsor as well.
We do. It's great. The insight that we get from other people, seriously, we're a whole lot further down the path because of insights from other people in our lives, right? And Richard Mobley certainly is an insight guy, and I love him. But another person that I love is my co-host, Mike Harbour. And I'm sharing really something here was impactful for me. Mike, thank you. Years ago, I needed somebody to give me some insight. I really needed some engaged sight, as we'll unpack here a little bit more in a few minutes. And I reached out to Mike Harbour, my coach, and I said, Mike, I need some help on this. I need your perspective. I need some accountability. And he gave it to me. And so I invite you guys. Mike is a sponsor for this episode today, which is pretty exciting. And I'm sharing just my personal testimony of the impact that he can make in your business and in your life. So go reach out to him, harborresources.com. He's got a brand new thing that he's rolling out that I'm super pumped and excited about. Mike, I can't wait for you to get this out into the world. I think it'll be out here soon. It's the Professional Leadership Series, the Professional Leader Series. What a great package, great resource for folks. And maybe you want to highlight a little bit of that. I know you don't want to spend too much time on it, but again, thanks for being our sponsor, Mike.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate that. Appreciate the kind words. Professional Leader Series, 20 videos, over 11 hours of leadership content, Paul, for it's, to learn virtually different essential, what I call essential skills of leadership that we all need to learn as leaders. And you can do it in the comfort of your own home and stay warm during the winter. So thanks, Paul. Hey, let's jump in a little bit more to this idea of engaged. I love, Richard Mobley, the love that he got from Rick. I need to check into that relationship and see what's really going on. But
there's a lot of love there. I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of love.
what I love is that Richard is, the co-author of this chapter, Insight. One of the reasons that Richard has such insight is because he's like 7 foot tall. He's like one of the tallest. So he can see further than the rest of us, right? I mean, he's got an advantage, right, Rick?
Absolutely. Yeah, he can see from it's unobstructed view. He literally lives like a plane, right? He's above the clouds all the time.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, Gustafson is tall, but then there's even Gustafson looks up to
I'm 6'4", he's 6'8", 6'9". I think he might be 7 feet. I mean, the name of his company is like 7'4". Like, well, maybe it's 7'4". I don't know.
Yeah, I asked him that one time, but it actually means something else. But Paul, in the book, you share the story, the Verizon commercial. I mean, how many of us have not repeated that? Can you hear me now? Right. Or it reminds me of a commercial. I don't know if you remember it. It rolled out in the Super Bowl. Here we are talking about, we're coming on, this episode's after the Super Bowl, but what's up? I don't know if y'all remember the Bud Light commercials, right? There's always those commercials that kind of stick with you. And then the story of Alex Smith. I just love that you brought that. I'm a huge Alex Smith fan, as I said earlier. I'm a Chiefs fan. And so by the time this episode airs, the Chiefs will have won their back-to-back Super Bowls. But Alex Smith, I was disappointed when they let Alex Smith leave the Chiefs because I thought he was he was a good quarterback. Nothing like the guy that's at Kansas City now, Patrick Mahomes, right? But, the story of Alex Smith coming, making the comeback, in working with the team, engaging them. And then obviously there had to be a lot of empathy in there, which is really where we get this whole idea of engaged sight. Let's unpack this a little bit more. Rick, let's start with you and this idea of engaged sight.
Yeah, what's interesting as we discuss Alex Smith is if you have the hindsight and listen to previous episodes, we really have followed the story. And when we recorded it was he was going to get back on the field, and then we were recording again right after he got on the field. And we even remarked at that point of, wouldn't it be amazing if he did come back, because the Joe Theismann, which was known as the career-ending injury, the Theismann injury is what he was compared to, and now there's hope, and that shows the advancement of our medical community and the true grit of some of these athletes is now it's the Alex Smith injury, which means it's not a potential career ender, right? It's really interesting to see that. But I think the best way is through service. If you really look, if want to know more about Alex Smith, we've been talking internally and offline a little bit about this Project 11 documentary. And you heard in the speech there where he was thanking some of the military folks. But what was interesting was the insight these military folks were giving him. And it's in the documentary, but he's in these hospitals where people have been injured serving our country. And here he is, the broken leg playing football. And he understands right there that in the grand scheme of things, right? And he's trying to discuss whether or not to lose his leg and what's life going to be like. And he's asking them those questions, and they just had this hope that allowed him to start to rebuild. And I think it's beautiful to watch. It's a great documentary, not just because of the sports aspect, but just the true human grit, but also some of the insight that we get from these powerful military people that have sacrificed so much for us. And, Mike, I don't think we say it enough, but we want to thank you for your service. And I think through service is the best way to engage sight. Being a servant leader, right? John says people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I had a recent experience, and it's just, again, it was just different perspectives, but it was the first time ever running a project where there's two projects going on, and the only thing different is the project manager. So you got the same developers and you have the same sponsor. The only thing different is me and this other person. And in servant leadership, my questions are like, I don't run the project. I serve the team members to be as excellent as they can be. So I ask questions of what's one thing I can take away from you to make you even better? Like what are your blockers? That's one of my biggest questions. What's blocking you from getting to that ultimate performance that you're trying to do? And it's my job to go knock it down. But then once you hear it, you got to go do it. Right. And then once you do it and they see that you're a person that's serving them, then they'll work harder for you. And it's just amazing to see the progress that we've made in this one project. And again, it has nothing to do with me as a project manager. The other person is basically saying, do it my way. do it this way. This is the report I want. This is the way I want you to communicate with me. This is the way I want you to report progress. And it's not coming through as much. Whereas I'm sitting there going, I'll report progress over here. You tell me what you think I need to know, and then I'll be here to help you. And literally, we're getting 3 times the productivity out of this team. And again, I don't say that in terms of my project management experience, but it's the first time I've ever been able to truly compare apples to apples in that approach. Because normally you could say, oh, it's the development team or it's the sponsor, but this is the one time where everything's the same except for the model of leadership that is being provided. And it's so engaging and basically it's empowering to where the teams engage each other. So that's a little foresight. It's a little hindsight, and I think that creates that ultimate word. And Paul, there's no other really word to say it, but engage sight.
It's good. Love it. Yeah, Diane, what are some of your thoughts on this? Because engage sight, I mean, one of the reasons why we wanted you to, as part of this podcast, is the engagement that you do with us. You know, certainly we've had a good history here in terms of leadership awards that we've done with the John Maxwell team, which has been fantastic. And the engaged site is really a big part of who you are. So what are some of your thoughts on this?
Well, and we talked about, I loved Alex's story because when he first was there, it was all about getting back into football, right? And then it was, how am I going to be a father? And then it was getting the different perspective of the heroes he was really around. And Rick, when you're talking about the tale of the 2 project managers, right? When we're talking about engagement, we're talking about connection. And we talked about some of those questions that we needed to ask earlier on. And we talked about a little bit of the beach ball and the different perspectives that carries when we were talking about the hindsight and the foresight. But engaged sight really is about making the connection. And when we start to talk about some of those user stories and who's it for and what are we doing it for and why and what do we need, it's asking the question, but then it's stopping to listen. And I think sometimes the leader forgets to stop to listen. Yeah. We're often listening to respond rather than listening to hear. And that is an art and a practice that really comes into the engagement part of it and really when we talk about the styles as well, you know, we've got our dominant styles who like to be seen, heard, chatted up. We've got the ones who are going to jump right in there and share their story, but we really need in the engagement process to draw out those quieter people that are sitting back and they're reflecting and they're listening and they really have it there. But as a leader and really getting in that engagement, we need to give that space for that quiet one to answer, because there's the nuggets of the introvert that's going to come out when you ask for it.
Yeah, that's such great. I love that. I love that take. You mentioned connection, which I think is important. The listening piece, which is absolutely critical. And this is something that every leader can sharpen and get better at, right? If you think you're a good listener, guess what? You can be a better one. If you don't think you're a good listener, guess what? You can be a good listener. And that's so important. And engaged sight is a quality of a culture when you think about it, right? Think of those great environments where there is engaged sight that's happening. It's 2 ways. It's not just leader pushing down. It's not just bottom up. It's top down and bottom up. It's all around. It's just an amazing feeling and experience. I've been a part of a church where I've seen that engaged sight that's happening. I've been a part of a company that's part of that. I've been with friends who have it. I've been in those environments where I don't see it. And let me tell you, there's a big difference. We want to be in environments where there's engaged sight that's happening all around. 2 key behaviors. And I love the servant element to it. Rick, that's spot on. It really is, because when we're in service of others, it makes a difference. I remember talking to Mark Miller. He talked about that, right? Serve. Serve means to him, see the future, embody the values, reinvent continuously, value results and relationships, and engage and equip others. That's his definition of serve, which is powerful. But it's about being proactive and connecting with others, that word connection again, Diane, and seeking to understand. And I know, Mike, this is a big thing that you shared with me early on when you were coaching me, seeking to understand before being understood, how critical that is. And I love for you to dive into that. But, you know, this idea of engaged sight, a book that I love, resource is Creativity Inc., and we can unpack that later. But Mike, you know, I should really lean to you because you really helped me with this engaged sight a long time ago. So what are some of your thoughts on this?
I think the key, Paul, is just involving others, right? I mean, a big term that floats around in our world right now is solopreneur, right? I pride myself on being a solopreneur. It's kind of the new word for entrepreneur, but oftentimes what solo means is solo. We don't work with anybody else. We don't ask anybody else. We don't seek others' advice or ideas. And I think that's the danger sometimes in leadership is we also, even though we have a team around us, we're solo and we come up with the idea. We think it's ours to, the problem is ours to solve, and we're not engaging the perspectives of others, Paul. So, I mean, that idea is nothing new that I've taught you about getting in the canoe and paddling over to the other island, right? That's something that you and I talked about. If people aren't engaging with you, then as a leader, you got to go engage with them. That's what engaged side is. It's your responsibility to go get the different perspectives, ask the right questions, get the other viewpoints, and don't be a long range leader. Because if you lead alone for too long, you will find yourself alone in the future. So that's kind of my thoughts around that, Paul. And I want to kind of move us into this cultivating it, right? So we talked about the high points of what engaged side is, but it's important that we cultivate the idea, because when we have a group of people, a team, we don't want solo team members either. So let's talk about this idea of cultivating engaged side in others. Diane, you want to start with that?
And, I love how you painted the picture of the height of Richard, because we're talking about Richard's section here. And one of the tips he talks about is the observation piece. And, clearly he's got the bird's eye view because he's a 7-foot person. Observing is his lifestyle. But it is observing what's going on around you, and to the point of looking at that, the observation, asking the questions, looking for the quiet person and seeing how are they engaging together? And we talk about the evaluating the experience. We've talked about, I love how he talks about riding the wave, right? Riding the wave of, let's see how the foresight and the hindsight come together into this engaged sight, and how do we move forward with that? And really just confronting the truth, because sometimes the leader doesn't want to hear the truth. Like, solopreneur, we got all the answers, right? We know what we're doing.
Yes, I do.
And sometimes when you're asking for the engagement and you're asking for the information, sometimes you hear what you don't necessarily want to hear. And we have to be open to that as well.
Yeah, that's the danger of having all the answers, right? Is not wanting to hear something that's in conflict with that, because we get sold on our own ideas. We get sold on our own perspective. How about you, Rick?
Yeah, I think that's a great way that you said it. And to tie a couple of things that you said in the past as well, Mike, you referenced a client that had just gotten into leadership and was somewhat, complaining about what was happening, right? Complaining about their people, and in turn complaining. You also talked about how people are promoted, and that's something that I study a lot. There's something called the halo effect, right? The halo effect is essentially, because you're good at something, we automatically assume you're going to be good at something else. And unfortunately, the promotion is, hey, you're a really good developer, so you're going to be a really good leader of developers. Or, hey, you're a really good accountant, you're going to be a great leader of accountants. And that's not necessarily true. It's two totally different skill sets. And what I see leaders do and make the biggest mistake is they apply what made them successful to the team. And it doesn't work that way, right? That's hey, I have all the answers. And so one of the things I try to teach is be conceptual, not directive. And I think it's really, so for instance, when I built my PMO, there was my formats, there were the ways I do status reports, there's the way I lead my meetings, there's all that kind of stuff, but that fits my style. For instance, I don't take a tremendous amount of notes during a meeting. because I can remember the conversations. It's just the way my brain works, but I do take down the bullet points and the key decisions. And that's how I do my meeting notes. A little bit different than other people, but it's the way that it works for me. And I remember when I got promoted to PMO, I started to think that just because that works for me doesn't mean it's going to work for other people. And so I came up with the concepts that I wanted them to communicate. I said, there's 5 things that you're going to communicate every week, but I don't care how you do it. If you want to do it in an email, Word document, whatever, it doesn't matter to me. And people started going, well, wait, what about consistency? I said, well, the consistency is the concepts that we're doing, not necessarily the format in which we're communicating those. And they were very successful. Then the next PMO manager they got was very directive, like literally was making them record the meetings and then transcribing those, even the uhs and ands and ums and buts. And there wasn't great tools out there like Otter is now, where you could just plug that thing in and it does it for you. So they were having to sit there and replay a meeting and go backwards and forwards and type it up. So they were spending about 5-6 hours per meeting for no value, in my opinion, no value at the end of the day. But it's just really important that because we became successful doesn't mean that that exact way or format is going to make somebody else successful, which makes you have to then start to ask questions from a contribution perspective. How would you like to do it? How do you communicate this? How would you like to see this? What do you need from me? Those types of things that really start to engage the team. What's incredible about that for me is that when I allowed the PMO members to thrive in their own way, there's actually templates that they use that I've replaced mine with going forward. There were better ideas and there were better ways to do it. And there were better ways to think through it. So to me, you've got to have the foresight to be able to say that these are the things we need to do. The hindsight to be able to say what's worked for you guys in the past, and the engaged side to merge those together and push forward.
Mm.
Yeah, that brings us, coming back, Rick, you talked about the medical community earlier. When we think about Alex Smith, one of the reasons, right, that he was able to get back on the field is because of the insight, the foresight that years and years ago, the medical community was able to look into the future to say, how can we do this better? The hindsight to learn from what they've done in the past, right? And the engaged site to work with other doctors, other nurses, other care providers, making holistic care. Alex Smith is on the field, number one, because of his mindset and his heart set. But it really has to do with where the advances in medical care versus when Joe Theismann had a very similar, if not the same injury, the advances in medical care are completely different today. It's all because of this concept of insight that we've talked about, right? Looking into the future, but also looking back and saying, okay, what are the things that we've learned from the past that we can carry into the future, but make better? And that's really what this idea of engaged side is all about. Paul, why don't you talk about some key questions we can ask to help drive this and cultivate this in others?
Yeah, this is a good dialogue. And I think you hit some of the key points on those questions, right? Well, how can we make it better? That's a powerful question. I mean, people think they might dismiss it because it's so common, but it's not. We got to ask that question. How can we make it better, guys? Again, we're engaging with contributors. We are a team. How can we make it better? How are we adding value? How are we serving? To the service question. How are we connecting? I read a book a few years ago called The Culture Code. You guys ever read that book, Dan Coyle? Yeah. And it's so good. And one of the chapters he talks about, here's some ideas for actions, guys. And I'll just, again, I'm just kind of running through these ideas, but it's so perfect and it ties to what we're talking about. One of the points he makes is that, hey, make sure everyone has a voice. When you ask those questions, you have an opportunity for everybody to have a voice. We talk about the persona template. It's in the book, and I'm not going to unpack it here, but this will give you a chance to really kind of see, okay, who's on my team? Who do we have? What are the roles and responsibilities that each of us have? Who are we serving? So you got to think about that standpoint, but making sure that everyone has a voice. And this might be even your customers. It's not just your team, but also your customers. Their voice matters. Bezos has a empty chair in the room whenever he has a board meeting. Why? Because he wants everybody to remember the customer. He says the empty chair is for the customer. We got to remember who that is. Make sure everyone has a voice. The other thing is the service part, of you look at some of the great leaders, John Wooden. I mean, he picked up the trash, right? Ray Kroc, he picked up the trash. What are you doing, right? There's nothing below us or beneath us to go do what we have to do to be able to be humble and really connect with other people. We serve. Rick's point earlier. I love this idea of collisions that he talks about in there too, and creating threshold moments when somebody comes in and letting them know who they are. Like when they go to Pixar, they let folks know, hey, look, whatever you were before, you're a filmmaker now. So you need to help us make our films better. And so they feel like a contributor right out of the gates, which is fantastic. And there's so many other good things, but one that I love and one that we do here is embrace fun. Engage site is also about having some fun moments, work hard, play hard, engage, have some fun, embrace fun. That's so key. So those are some thoughts there to add to what we're talking about, Mike.
Yeah, it's good. Are we having fun yet? That's the question, right? I love this conversation. I think about, I'm a huge Star Wars fan, just think about the insight that it took. I mean, Paul, you're a technology guy, and Rick is a movie buff. He's been part of Disney, but think about the insight that it took to create the Star Wars movies back in the 70s and the early 80s, right? And versus the technology that we have today, right? But it was taking that experience, that hindsight, engaging the future, engaging in a future, a digital future, and digital technology to make the movies what they are today. I still love the stories from the old ones back in, when I was growing up, but the digital things that they do today is certainly impressive. Let's dive into our tip and challenge, Paul. What's your tip and challenge for our listeners coming out of this chapter or this portion of insight for our listeners?
Yeah, I would say it's real simple. Engage site. Don't leave home without it. Don't leave home without it. Don't go to the office or wherever that space and place of work is and not put it into play. It is the tool that you need to leverage and use every day. And if you're a part of the team, you have Engage site. You need to be a part of a team and a culture where you're allowed to share. And that's what we all want. We all have a common goal. We're all designed to make better films as we share with the Pixar story. So don't leave home without it. Seek wisdom, share wisdom if you're a leader, and be a part of it. Be a contributor if you're part of the team. The best way to lead is to contribute. So the challenge is go harvest some insight, identify here's one tip, right? On a piece of paper, who are the people in your life who have helped you lead? Take a moment, 5 minutes. Alex Smith did that before that speech that you just watched. He sat down and he went through and thought through of all the people that allowed him to get through the challenge and the struggle that he had. And through that process, that whole little 2-minute piece that we shared was really Engage site, because he's talking about those that he really engaged with and gave him insight and foresight and hindsight to be able to do what he did. It's amazing. So that's my tip and challenge.
That's good. I think, Paul, for me, when I think about this chapter and the tip I want to share our listeners, without insight and the three elements of insight, which is foresight, hindsight, Engage site, you will be blindsided, right? We can get blindsided and never know what hits us. And so what I want to do is just challenge our listeners to go back and read this chapter and learn the things that you need to learn to improve your insight. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is insanity. And so insight removes the insanity from the things that we're doing in the future. So use the three factors of foresight, hindsight, and Engage site to see further, go faster, and create a better future for you and your team.
Yeah, fantastic. Hey, we want to thank our sponsor for today's show. It's Harbor Resources. Again, go to harborresources.com. He's got some great resources for you. Speaking of Harbor Resources, and excited of everything that you're doing, Mike. Thanks for being our sponsor. And if you want to be a sponsor for a show, we're certainly we want to add value to our listeners and our viewers. And if you got something that is of a great resource to share, let us know. We have an opportunity for you to be a sponsor. Also, check out some of the things that we have out on our website, breakingaverage.com. So, Mike, this has been great.
Yeah, I want to just on behalf of Paul and I thank Diane and Rick for what they bring to the conversation as well. Dan and Rick, you always add some new insight to us and help us move the show forward. Thank you if you're watching live on the Empowered Living Show, if you're listening to the podcast, the Breaking Average podcast. Continue to come back and be a listener. Make sure you remember if you know somebody we need to talk to, go to breakingaveragepodcast.com/leader. And also make sure you pick up a copy of Paul's book, Breaking Average, the 7 Critical Factors for Team Leadership. You can go to breakingaveragebook.com and grab a copy of that. Paul, it's been a great conversation, and continue to stay enthused and excited about this idea of breaking average in my own life and on the Breaking Average. So we'll see you all next time on the Breaking Average podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R2 Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.